all those moments will be lost in time.
Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. Now, very quickly before I get into the video, I have new merch. It says "Wish You Weren't Here." If you follow me on Twitter, you already know that, but I haven't announced it here yet because I want to be wearing it. So anyway, we are back on our depressing bullshit, and prepare yourself because this one is genuinely both very sad and also enraging. There's this article titled "Man Who Murdered His 5 Children Sentenced to Death in South Carolina." A United States jury has sentenced a man to death after convicting him of murdering his 5 young children in 2014 before driving their decomposing bodies through several states and dumping them in Alabama. I have to say, the idea of someone killing their children and then also just driving their decomposing body through the states, what weirds me out about that, and I'm not at all a psychologist or anything like that, but I just wonder mentally how you can do that, because as much as I believe that you can have a moment of rage, not that that justifies murder, mind you, but I believe that you can have a moment of rage that blinds you. But it's so strange to me to think that this moment or whatever was going on lasted long enough for this person to be able to drive through multiple states with the bodies of his own children just lying there. And as we get deeper into the story, it gets more fucked up, more disgusting, more disappointing, so hold on to your wigs. The jurors voted unanimously to give Timothy Jones Jr. the death penalty. The same jury last week found him guilty of the murders of... His children's names are ones I'm not familiar with, so I'm going to try and not butcher them. Mara, 8, Elias, 7, Nathan, 6, Gabriel, 2, and Abigail, 1. Jurors considered whether to give Jones the death penalty or life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jones, 37, a divorced former software engineer, did not testify at the trial in South Carolina. In closing arguments, prosecutor Rick Hubbard said the murders of children under the age of 11 warranted the death penalty. Let the punishment fit the crime, Mr. Hubbard told jurors. He is a mass murderer. I feel like I know where I stand on this one, and I don't think it would surprise any of you where I stand on this one. I'm pretty sure you can guess. But he is a mass murderer, that's simply a fact, and murdering anyone is egregious, of course, but murdering your own children adds a new layer of just fucked up that most people, even people who are against the death penalty, would probably still be so emotionally invested in that they'd still probably want the death penalty for you, even if they're against it. Anyway, if you want to, let me know what you think about the death penalty down below. Defense lawyer Casey Secor reminded jurors that Jones's mother was institutionalized with schizophrenia, a sometimes inherited mental illness. How much more death does the Jones family have to endure, Mr. Secor said. During the week-long penalty phase of the trial, the jury saw graphic photos of police evidence and heard emotional testimony from the children's school teachers and relatives. Jones's father, Timothy Jones Sr., pleaded for his son's life and took his shirt off in court to show his back tattooed images of his slain grandchildren. Jones's ex-wife, Amber Kaiser, testified that she hoped for mercy for Jones even as she condemned what he had done. See, now, this is one of those things where I can't imagine being in the position of the father or the wife, because you're just so torn between, yeah, you once loved this man, or this man is your son, so you automatically love him, but at the same time, how do you kind of separate the man from the man's actions? You know what I mean? You can't really separate a person from their actions, so the person becomes tainted because of their actions, if that makes sense. You know how sometimes celebrities do something really shitty, but then someone says, oh, you know, I still listen to their music because I separate, you know, let's take Chris Brown as an example. People separate Chris Brown from his music because they're like, I enjoy his music, but I know that he's done some fucked up shit and he's abusive, right? I think you can ignore certain things. Like, if I don't agree with a celebrity's politics, they're not automatically canceled to me, you know? Like, that's something I can get over. There are some things, like being an abusive piece of shit, that I don't really get over. Here, it's almost like they want to separate Jones Jr. from what Jones Jr. did, which was murdering his children, and that's just a separation that I personally wouldn't be able to make, whether I love the person or not. That's not a mistake. That's not something you can really atone for, in my opinion. That's something that would make me disconnect from someone. As much as you probably still love them and still care for them in some way, that's just one of those things that I can never imagine myself kind of like pleading for mercy, because I'd just be so invested in the other emotions I feel for the children, if that makes sense. But I'm not in that position, so who knows, maybe if I were in that position, I would think differently. He did not show my children mercy by any means, but my kids loved him, Miss Kaiser said. Also, about the mental illness part of this, because that's not something we can just gloss over. As much as I believe that he potentially had a mental illness, I just feel like it's almost silly to bring up that his mother was institutionalized with schizophrenia, because first of all, if we don't have a confirmation that he has schizophrenia, there's no point of even bringing it up, you know, being like, oh, it's sometimes inherited. Well, okay, but is it here? And also, even if it is his responsibility to get checked out if something weird is going on. If he's hearing voices, it's his responsibility to see a doctor and get the right medication so he can get everything under control and make sure that he can take care of his children. And if he can't take care of his children, it's also his responsibility to have them stay with their grandparents, with the ex-wife, with someone. It's still your responsibility. So I don't like when mental illness is brought up as a way to kind of excuse things, because there's no excuse. And as an adult, especially if you have children, it is your responsibility to make sure that they're okay. The schizophrenia thing, it's not even confirmed, so I'm kind of wondering why it would even be brought up when it's just a possibility. Jones was arrested in Mississippi in September 2014 and led police to the children's bodies wrapped in garbage bags in Alabama. He confessed to the police his middle son, Nathan, died in their mobile home after Jones punished him, and that he later strangled the other 4 children. Jones said in a 2014 phone call from prison played in court that he snapped when he killed Nathan 6 because the child was crying for his mother. Over the next several hours, Jones went and got cigarettes, taking his oldest daughter so she would not call for help, and leaving the 3 other kids with their brother's body. This is where my rage really just starts to get intense. It's interesting that Nathan was being punished, and then right after that we find out that really, I mean, potentially he was being punished, but then also there's the snapping that I'm kind of thinking is related to the punishment. You know, like at first he punished him being like, don't mention your mom or whatever the case may be, and then after he snapped. I don't know, there's no real detail here, but there's no excuse nonetheless. But what really fucks me up is, aside from this murdering of his child, which I don't have to explain why that's horrible, the fact that he would just leave his child there, his dead child that he just killed, he would leave him there with 3 other children who need to be traumatized by seeing their sibling dead in front of them. And not only is that irresponsible, because you shouldn't be leaving young children alone, but it's disgusting that he didn't even care that this would fuck the other children up. He didn't care. Them just being faced with the body of their dead sibling. The logistics of this also scare me a little bit, because he really thought it through. For someone who is supposedly unstable, or they were trying to make him sound unstable, he was very level-headed in bringing his older daughter with him so she couldn't call the cops or someone to come and help them. That's a very evilly logical thing to do in that situation, which kind of makes me doubt whether he was, you know, unstable, potentially, whether he had schizophrenia or anything else. I don't know what's going on, but he definitely had his head at least somewhat on his shoulders to think, hey, my oldest daughter should come with me so then she can't call for help, and let me just leave my other children here with the body of a dead sibling. Disgusting. Jones said a gremlin voice told him to kill the rest of the children. A psychiatrist testified during the guilt phase of the trial. In a confession, Jones said he strangled 7-year-old Elias with his hands and chased down 8-year-old Mara before choking her. He then used a belt to choke 2-year-old Gabriel and 1-year-old Abigail. As if this weren't horrendous enough, I read this before, but I didn't remember reading these details, maybe because I specifically chose to erase them from my memory because of how horrendous they are. The idea that he strangled 4 of his children, then even chased down one of them, and the fact that his 2 youngest children were so young too, 1 and 2 years old, and you strangle them with a belt. Mr. Hubbard said Jones was a selfish, evil man who abused his children and murdered them out of rage and fear of being caught. Agreed. Mr. Hubbard said when Jones's wife left him, he could not stand that his control was over. Mr. Jones is the second person to be sent to South Carolina's death row in 5 years. The state has not executed anyone since 2011 because it lacks the drugs to carry out lethal injection. Now, this is one of the reasons why I specifically wanted to talk about this case. Apart from it being disgusting and blood boiling, it's also a bit exceptional in the sense that it's been 5 years since anyone in South Carolina was sentenced to the death penalty. So in a related article, it talks about the wife of Jones. Here there's more quotes of what she said in court. So there's a bit of a repetition, but she said, "He did not show my children any mercy by any means, but my kids loved him, and if I'm speaking on behalf of my kids and not myself, that's what I have to say." Under cross-examination by by prosecutor Suzanne Mays. She, the mother, added, "I'll respect whatever the jury decides." So it turns out that Jones was a terrible person also towards his wife, which I think is pretty unsurprising at this point. And it says, "On Tuesday, she wept again when recalling her children, but she also sounded adamant and aggravated as she described again how Jones hit her, spat in her face in front of their young daughter, and threatened to chop her up and feed her to pigs during their marriage." So this is where it gets even stranger. So a social worker says that Jones is a product of rape and voodoo. Deborah Gray said Jones's grandmother was raped by her stepfather and gave birth at age 12 to Jones's father. Jones's mother had schizophrenia and went into a mental institution when Jones was 3. She spent decades there, Miss Gray said. Her psychiatric records showed she told doctors her father molested her and locked her in a closet with a dead chicken dripping blood on her as part of a voodoo ritual, Miss Gray said. The social worker detailed 3 generations of rapes, molestation by family members, gunshots, stabbings, drug deals, voodoo rituals, prostitution, frequent screaming fights, and cursing at children. She said Jones' mother dipped him in ice water baths and gave him laxatives to try to make him behave. Jones's lawyers are trying to show he struggled from undiagnosed mental illness and cracked after his failed marriage. If it in fact is true that Jones went through all of this, that is horrendous. No person should go through that. But there are plenty of people who go through traumatic events and they are nonetheless capable of being decent human beings. Some of them have a tough time, but they seek out help and do what they can to be responsible adults. If this happened to him, that's horrible, but that does not help or justify anything, in my eyes anyway. Jones said in a confession he felt his 6-year-old Nathan was trying to attack him by conspiring with his ex-wife, and he exorcised the boy until he collapsed and died after he broke an electrical outlet. Several hours later, Jones said he decided to kill the other children, and we know how that happened. I'm not going to say that again. Prosecutors said Jones was an evil, selfish father who killed Nathan in a rage and then the rest of his children because he didn't want his ex-wife to have them. Both sides have blamed alcohol and drug use for the killings. Prosecutors said Jones used synthetic marijuana instead of caring for his kids. Defense lawyers said Jones used drugs to try to treat his undiagnosed schizophrenia, but it made the condition worse. There's a lot to take in here, mainly because the article that I read prior that was really about the death sentence didn't mention a lot of these things, and in my opinion, a lot of these things weren't mentioned because there just isn't proof. Like I said, if you're going to mention a mental illness, get him diagnosed and then bring it up. But if it's to mention a mental illness and be like, oh, well, it's not diagnosed, so we technically don't know, I don't really understand the point of mentioning it at all unless you're trying to score some kind of points. As for the voodoo, the rape, I'm sure that's possible. I'm pretty certain it's probably true. But again, his being mistreated by his parents does not equate to him being allowed to do anything. And on the other hand, I'm also wondering how crazily selfish he is that he'd rather kill his children than letting his wife have them for a while, or at least while he was getting his shit together. I genuinely think that is the most disgusting, selfish thing I can imagine. This case, honestly, is one of the stranger cases, mainly because of this involvement of potential voodoo. He just seemed to want his children either with him or not alive at all, which is honestly disgusting. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know if you think he deserves a death sentence or what sentence you think he deserves. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and let's get right into the